Hi folks, you're with Tassus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for joining this live stream. Now in this chat I'd like to talk about hiring and hiring, say, in the sort of middle management category, I guess jobs that pay somewhere sort of north of 50,000 US dollars per annum, but probably under say $120,000 per annum. So somewhere in that range. Now, I was recently at a birthday party for a stockbroker, and there was a whole lot of people there, and a big turnout actually. And one of the people there was the HR director for one of the big financial institutions. So pretty serious gig that would have paid quite well. And she was there, and just as mingling with the crowd and all that sort of stuff, we ended up having a chat. So we were talking about HR issues, I guess, trying to be polite at first, and talking about something that she would be comfortable in discussing, and an area of expertise that she would have had. So we kind of went through that, but I asked some questions along the way, and it piqued my interest as I was listening to this. She came out with phrases like she couldn't afford to hire people who were confident, that knew what they were doing, that had achievements to their credit and were good at what they did and could prove it, and so on. Why wouldn't you want to hire competent people who had achievements to their credit? Surely that's something that any organization would want. No, it's not. Because people with that level of confidence who've achieved things in their own right, two issues there. One is their confidence will make less qualified people feel inferior. So we can't have that. And those less qualified people tend to be minorities, and that makes the minorities feel bad about themselves. So we can't hire well-qualified white people, particularly straight white males, to come into the company, which seemed crazy. So I thought maybe it was a joke. But no, she was deadly serious there. That was their policy. The second, or not a declared open policy, but one that was kind of, they were putting into practice. The other side of it was, the better qualified someone is, the less control you have over them, because they can go and get another job if they're really good at what they do. And can prove it. So it's better to hire people that are not very good at what they do, because then in return you have control over them. They'll do what they're told, and so on. So the line managers in the company were coming to her and saying, look, I want someone who's qualified but not well qualified. I want someone who's minimally qualified, and in that way they won't leave if we annoy them, or if they get treated shabbily, or so on, or treated arbitrarily and slapped around or something like that. They won't leave, and then we can in effect intimidate them and stand over them. So we want that. And so the irony is that the best qualified people aren't getting a look in certainly in this place at least, but it appears to be widespread, and getting more widespread, this view that if you hire someone who's confident, it's a problem, because it creates anxiety and feelings of reduced worth amongst the other lesser qualified employees. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, of course, if only the best qualified people were being hired, but because there's so many race and gender quotas and disability quotas and whatever else, because there's so much of this, it's now more and more people, more than half the people, are unqualified, very unqualified, seriously unqualified. So they do feel inadequate in the event they're working alongside someone who is well qualified. So the answer to this isn't to stop the quotas and stop hiring unqualified people. The answer is to stop hiring qualified people. Can you believe the madness of that paradigm? But there you have it. And here's a HR director who herself isn't, I wouldn't suggest, overqualified in that role, and that's what she's pushing. But she's being pushed into it by the board of directors and the people at the very apex of this this large financial institution. So it's hardly her choice per se, but she is sympathetic to it. So she's not part of the blue-haired sort of lesbian set, but very much on board with the patriarchy is everywhere. Mass migration should be allowed because it's somehow a social virtuous good, but you can't describe how. It kind of just is, and she talks a lot like she's still in the high school debating team or something like that, and even then not putting up a very good debate. So you could definitely not call this woman attractive in any sense, and she surrounded herself with gay men. There's the whole HR department's pretty much made up of gay men, and then she simultaneously complains that none of the guys will hit on her to take her out on a date or something like that. So she's feeling, in socially at least, rather sorry for herself, but convinced that these problems are not because of she's unattractive or rather terse or immersing herself in sort of victim ideology. It's not because of that. It's because of the patriarchy and white supremacy and yada yada. So it's very much on board with all that. So probably fits into the overall HR view. I wouldn't call her, or certainly didn't come across to me as being someone who's going out of their way to be vindictive or something like that. But nonetheless, those were the views. It's not the first time I've heard similar things like this. Now, it wasn't something that I remember hearing years ago. The idea of hiring the most qualified person would happen not all the time, most of the time. Sometimes people hired someone they liked, or they hired a buddy or a relative. Those things still went on, but not to the extent we see it now. The majority of people that certainly I worked with as a young man were well qualified. They had a lot of drive and energy. They wanted to get out and do things, achieve things, and build a better company, a more successful company, and look after their families well. All this sort of stuff, and that's you don't really see that so much now. The sort of people who are getting hired are the ones that tick the affirmative action boxes in race and gender and sexuality and disability, all that sort of thing, and they're just going through the motions. Increasingly, jobs are being not so much automated per se by robotics, but automated in the sense of everyone's using a checklist. So they don't really have to be any good. They just have to satisfy the checklist requirement, and you can see and the extreme nature of it, because so many minorities are being waved through with and just given degrees for attending college rather than actually passing exams or proving any competence. Like as a health and safety officer or health and safety director in a large organisation, and it's an intellectually challenged young woman's got the gig. But because she has the certificate from the community college, then that satisfies the requirement that the insurance company has that a qualified, certified person sits in the role. So they've got this mentally retarded young woman sitting there, almost drooling, for goodness sakes. Is that far off? But she's got the certificate, so the boxes can be ticked, and she has a little checklist to go through. Have you pressed button B at 9 o'clock? So she goes through her little checklist. So her job doesn't actually require exercising of expertise or knowledge or anything like that. She just has to go through. So as long as she's signing or ticking off the checklist and signing it, she therefore has fulfilled her job requirement. And the people further up the food chain can sort out anything that manages to make it past her and onto their desks. So this changing of job roles into ticking boxes and ticking off checklists, this is also changing the nature of employment. You don't need someone who knows what they're doing. You just need someone who's got a certificate. And if you're a minority, you get given certificates, then you can get into the job and then do the box checking. But this idea of don't hire someone who knows what they're doing, or don't hire people who are confident or who have achievements or credentials, this idea of not hiring those sort of people in the interest of some sort of ideological concept of workplace harmony, this is really spreading further and further. Having said that, it's spreading into areas that don't have to compete in the marketplace to make their money. They've got cartel pricing powers, oligopolies, monopolies, government protection, a combination of the above, so that they don't have to compete. And if you don't have to compete, you don't need people who know what they're doing or that are any good. And that's how they can kind of get away with it. And as I say, just ticking the boxes there. But it's changing the whole structure of work, wealth creation, how wealth will be produced. With it go standards of living and so on. It also creates an environment where the people at the apex become fewer and fewer in number because the middle class shrinks. The middle class is based on people bettering themselves through hard work, ingenuity, studying hard, and maybe inventing something or whatever. That's how the middle class is there, and of course with the rule of law and accountable government, that sort of thing. But once you start removing those things, and they are being removed fairly quickly too, then the middle class is particularly going to suffer, and particularly white people are going to suffer as they're the ones that are most likely to put the hard effort into studying at school or being industrious at work and living within their means and being frugal and so on. So this is also being dissipated as well. So that's a little snapshot there of the workplace and the idea that if you know what you're doing and you're confident, you'll become unemployable, which is a scary thought going forward. It was already scary now, but particularly going forward. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.